Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is uncertainty and the power, really, of uncertainty for generating something new, and how our rush to certainty kind of derails our opportunity to come to really new ideas and new solutions for things in many cases. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And good morning, Rosalind. So good to be starting the morning with you, starting the day with you, and everybody else who's joining us. Welcome. And so before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs and your bloodstream, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub those hands together, feel the tension, the friction, the temperature, pressure, all those sensations, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all of that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. So we're talking about uncertainty, and it's really interesting how we have a drive to certainty. We want to understand things. We want to be able to explain things. We want to we hold to our beliefs and convictions with the certitude that makes us know who, or believe that we know who we are and what we're all about, and there's a right way and there's a wrong way, and it's very, very interesting because it's a remnant of it's a characteristic of our predominant system that's based in domination and control and ownership and separation. And so when it might feel like a leap, that like how does all that connect with certainty? Well, certainty is know your place, right? Know your role. Know what your job description is, know what your lane is so you can stay in it. Our certainty gives us the illusion of control, right? If I have certainty that that something is going to play out in a certain way, or if I have certainty in my perception of another person or the way things should be, then if I know how things should be, then that gives me the authority, whether it's self-granted or legitimate in any way or not. It gives me the authority to try to enforce the way that things should be because I know. And being in uncertainty is tremendously uncomfortable. I mean, we're oriented, we are socialized to move towards certainty. So being in uncertainty rather than enlivening is often just tremendously uncomfortable. Good morning, Bernadette. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We are talking about the merits of being in uncertainty, and that doesn't mean being wishy-washy. We can be actively engaged in uncertainty, in that we can be in an inquiry around it. And if we take on uncertainty as an invitation, maybe it will allow us to question some of our presuppositions, some of our what they called in the forum an already listening, having an already listening. In other words, we have an expectation, we have a vantage point. We talk about this all the time, the view or the lens through which we perceive our world and our experiences. That is a certainty. Like we know how things are, and because we know how things are, then it gives me a way to be able to interpret the world, versus being in a world that is uncertain, where there are endless possibilities. The fact that there are endless possibilities in an uncertain world gives us an opportunity to access possibilities that we wouldn't otherwise have access to in a certain world, if that makes sense to you. Hopefully it does. So Rosalind says, program responses versus I am accepting what is actually in front of me instead of forcing it into something else. Yes. Thank you for that, Rosalind. Exactly. When we have certainty, we kind of try to make the world comply to whatever that certainty is about. I know the right way. The other thing is, like, familiarity is something that is a way that certainty masquerades sometimes. It's like, oh, I know what this is, right? Like I have identified this thing, and therefore I know what it is, and I don't have to be present to it anymore. I don't have to be really engaged with it anymore, because I know what it is. Like I know this person is this way, so I don't have to keep being present to who that person may be or may express themselves as in this moment. I can just kind of dismiss or allow myself to not be engaged, to not be truly present. Bernadette says, that's how you can learn what you may like or dislike. Can't do the same thing because we need to live, opposed to existing. Thank you, Bernadette. And to your point, living is a dynamic process. So I may not have liked something, a certain food, for instance, as a kid, and then as an adult, I really enjoy it. So who knows? We are dynamic beings, and life is a dynamic process. And in the process of life, there is change and transformation. So you've heard me often say my working hypothesis is, it's because it is a theory, it's a working idea. It's not something that I am absolutely certain about. And when we allow ourselves to reside in uncertainty, like to embrace uncertainty, then the question of, is there another way to see this? Is there another way to think about this? Is there another way to conceptualize this or contextualize this situation, this question, this circumstance? what we can do when we ask that kind of question is we're opening to new dimensions of possibility. And in the time that we are experiencing right now, which is an unprecedented time in human history, in terms of all the challenges that we're facing individually and globally, we are called to come up with new solutions or new approaches to things that we don't have an historical basis for. And we often gain our certainty from the past, which is really interesting. What we do is we develop this sense of knowing, this sense of certainty, and it's from our past experience, and then we project it into the future, which may or may not be that same kind of circumstance. It's unlikely that it will be the same circumstance, and our certainty can blind us to the potential that is available to us in that new future. So we can hold something as a hypothesis and test it, and that way we can benefit from perhaps the wisdom that's available from the past, while also leaving ourselves open to new possibility and new ways of thinking and being. So Rosalind says, what's the secret? The fear prohibits access. What's the fear? Fear of letting go of the known. Am I safe now? So I think you hit the nail on the head there, Rosalind, because I think that this whole drive towards certainty is motivated by fear, and fear of not being in control, and fear of a world that is unknown. And so learning to become comfortable with the unknown, learning to embrace it and find exhilaration in it rather than fear, is a place where hope resides, where potential and possibility reside. The other part of this world of domination and control that I mentioned earlier is predicated on a world that is hostile. You know, that we live in a dangerous world, that people are out to get us, that we are separate from one another, and it's about othering and separate threat, containing threat, you know, or containment. And if we instead can cultivate a perspective that life is happening for me and through me rather than to me, then the world is not a dangerous place anymore. And when we experience that fear, we can find access, when we really believe or allow ourselves to become immersed in the notion that life is happening for me and through me, then we can create a very different relationship with life's circumstances and with uncertainty itself. So Rosalind says it can feel like what are we willing to sacrifice for safety? Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that's such a big question, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then Rosalind continues, instead, seeing people around me as reflections somehow can be curious to see ourselves indirectly. So when we recognize our connectedness, we can see the people around us as aspects of ourselves. And that can be threatening when we see people around us that we're not all that thrilled by. But we can be in a very different type of relationship when we allow ourselves to see people around us as reflections, if we see ourselves as all connected and all essential. So back to the beginning of what you said, Rosalind, it can feel like, what are we willing to sacrifice for safety? And if you look at going back to 9/11, we allowed 9/11 to be the impetus for one of the biggest incursions on our civil liberties ever, right? Now it's a norm to go through the X-ray at the airport. Put your hands up, spread your feet, and stand there so that you can be X-rayed. To have our property searched, going through the, checking the luggage. We have normalized that kind of inspection, that kind of behavior. Like, that's okay. That's the norm. We have given up a lot of our privacy in the name of safety, and a lot of our rights. It's the norm for us, and I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be. I'm just pointing out, for safety, it's the norm to be able to be pulled over and stopped at a checkpoint. Like, the checkpoints can be set up and you can be stopped just to be checked. It's very, very interesting. It's not abnormal to see people, enforcement people with guns. And that has become the norm. Talk about for safety, talking about safety in schools, where some places have legalized that teachers can carry guns to help protect the kids in schools. So it's interesting what we allow in the name of safety, what we're willing to sacrifice. I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, more guns means more potential danger. That's me, and I know that, not everybody agrees, and that's okay. We can agree to civilly disagree. But it's interesting what we give up in the name of safety. And one of the things that we give up in the name of safety is speaking our hearts and minds, right? Because maybe we're afraid that we'll get attacked for saying what we believe. And oftentimes that happens. I mean, craziness. Look at what's going on, and how people are intimidating other people for having different beliefs. All the polarization, the threats of violence, the actual violence, right? Bernadette says, when you're sitting on the fence and one side is uncertain and the other side is in your mind unsafe, how do you manage the peaks on the fence when the control of what you desire is being dictated by those who control your right to safety? Wow, that's an intense question. So how do you manage the fence when the control of what you desire is being dictated by those who control your right to safety? Well, it's kind of how our system works, right? This is all part of trying to have the certainty that we're safe, right? We make rules, or we empower people to make and enforce rules that make us try to feel safe, and in our rush to certainty, the rules that we make are really playing whack-a-mole with symptoms. That's really that's really what's happening, is that we see a problem and we fix the problem, or what we think is the problem, but the problem that we're fixing is the symptom. So Rosalind says it becomes a desire for freedom from expectations, avoiding things that are unpleasant. Who is saying they're unpleasant or undesirable, right, Rosalind? So here's an example of certainty at its dysfunctional, less than optimum. So let's say there's a pothole that is in the road, and we can just go fix the pothole, right? Well, what happens? What if that pothole is in the road because every time it rains, the water is deflected in such a way that it's wearing that part of the road? Fixing the pothole doesn't fix the problem. It just alleviates the symptom temporarily until the water washes that part of the road away again. So then the question is, well, what can we do to utilize this water as a resource? So that's not usually how it's thought of. It's thought of, well, the water's a problem now, so we have to divert the water, and we can then divert the water, and that could be creating another problem, rather than recognizing the water as a resource that we can then capture. And then we have a system that is feeding itself. So in the rush to solve the problem, the rush to certainty to fix it, oh, we got that one off, we can check that off the checklist. We have allowed another potential problem. We've just forestalled the problem, in other words. And we've also lost the opportunity to take advantage of a resource that could be well utilized, of a ecological system that we could be enhancing. So certainty. I think that there's such a drive toward what we consider productivity that we just want to get stuff done, and we don't think about what it is we're doing. And so uncertainty hopefully allows us to slow down, step back, have a deeper look, have a more thorough perspective, relationship with the larger workings of the system that we're addressing. And being willing to be in the question. It is disruptive. It's disruptive to be in the question. It's disruptive to not know. And yet it's a new, it's probably partly it's so disruptive because it's unfamiliar. So as we allow ourselves to be curious and to be uncertain, truly, truly new potentials and new possibilities can arise, and new ways of thinking about things. The thing is, it's very inconvenient. So as an example, I was speaking with someone who's part of an organization, and there's a social, political challenge coming up in that organization. And we were looking at what different levels we might be able to think about it from. And when the structure itself is assumed, when the structure itself is certain, we don't tend to question the things that might be the very source of the problem. And so to be thinking about this situation from a systemic perspective could potentially be very, very disruptive, because it may mean, oh my gosh, we get to rework the system, which is very disruptive, right? And it also can lead to true fulfillment of potential. And what would be a true evolutionary step, a true accessing of actual potential, rather than a perpetuation, which is kind of just filling the pothole in the road. So I invite you to look at where in your life there has been certainty. Like, is that really the way this is? Is there another way to think about this in our relationships with each other, in our perspectives on our altercations with people or our frustrations? So Bernadette says, my pocketbook is not a safe place to continue paying for things that are out of my control and does not allow growth, leads to fear in itself. So it sounds to me like you're talking about maybe having some new ideas about your finances and the things that you're committed to. So these are all good questions. You know, it's all good to be looking at where is certainty at play? Where can I open new windows and doors to experience some new perspectives? And with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming at Enlightened World Network, EWN, One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And Bernadette says taxes and inflation, and that's beyond where we have time to go today. So much love and appreciation to you all, and to your willingness to be exploring these stimulating topics. Until next time, so much love to you.